My name is Brendan Cody, as Steve said, and thank you, Steve, for having me here. I'm the founder of Roots, and this company has kind of come to fruition from pretty much my entire life, and working with this target group of people has been really important to me for a long time. And today I'm going to talk to you about what Roots is and the goal of it, and really how we're going to decrease the recidivism rates through reading. And we're also going to talk about what recidivism rates are, the school-to-prison pipeline, and how that affects children nowadays in school and affects those being put into juvenile detention centers and later prison. I'm also going to share with you some information about recidivism rates and also some personal stories that really, I think, explain why I made this company more so than what it is. So to start out with kind of what we do at Roots is it's an ongoing project where we are looking at decreasing the recidivism rates, which is the rate in which a person goes back to prison within 3 years of being released, through reading. There's nothing in the prison right now that does this, and from my time spent in the prison, I've found that it is a huge issue, and a lot of people are in need of being taught how to read again and really understanding that fully, so then when they're released and put into the professional workforce, they can do so for us. Also, throughout this, if you have any questions, just please raise your hand. I'm happy to answer any of them kind of as we go. I just don't know exactly what people do and don't know, and I want to fill in all the gaps that maybe I'm hitting. So let me know if I'm missing anything. So to start, I want to share, this image will make sense in a second, but I want to share why I work with prisoners and really what I'm doing with them. And so to start, when I was 4 years old, I was diagnosed with a meningoencephalitis. It killed half my brain. I was in a coma for a month, and I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I couldn't walk. I couldn't really do anything other than sit in a wheelchair all day. And I know what it's like growing up with the odds stacked against you, and that's really what's happening for a lot of these people that we're seeing adding to these recidivism rates and making it into prison. So after that, I was able to relearn how to walk, write, become a functioning person. And as school went on, I had a lot of learning disabilities, and I was definitely just slower than a lot of the other kids. And this has its own challenges just inside the classroom, and the social stigma of not being good enough plays a huge role. And after that, I know that I've talked to a lot of people that I've worked with in the prison about this, and a lot of them have the same stories. And my mother left my family when I was in the 3rd grade, and she left for rehab. She was addicted to pharmaceutical drugs, and later died, actually a year later. And that was when I was in the 4th grade. And an interesting thing happens when it seems like your whole world is collapsing and falling apart. Nothing else really matters. Sitting at school, reading a book with a classmate or being engaged in that seems not as important to having food on the table and making sure that you are just okay being in your own shoes. And sometimes that plays a really hard role in these people's lives when they want to be good at school. They want to do all these things, but they don't have any of the resources to do it. And so now I want to fast forward a few years, and this is kind of bringing me to this photo here. My education career, I guess you could say, started in special education. I worked with kids with cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, severe spinal cord damages, and that's totally where I found my love for education. It's been absolutely amazing what I've learned from them and the skills I gained. And I think the biggest thing to highlight with that was that I was in high school, so I was only 18 years old, and I was working with kids who are generally 18 to 22, and I worked in a therapy pool with them. And they would wear a collar around their neck and their body would just be floating under the water, and the pool is heated up to about 90 degrees, so their body became limber, and we did exercises for them. And there was one of the days in the pool where something extraordinary happened. It was some event that I think changed the outcome of my life totally, and really drives me to work on things such as roots. I was noticing one of the kids, I'd been working with him for about 3 months now, and I was stretching out his spine. So we put weights on his ankles so his spine would stretch out at the deep end of the pool. And I looked down at him, and I saw his legs kicking under the water. And I was surprised and excited. I knew exactly what he was thinking, and he couldn't talk to me, which is a very troubling thing to deal with. And I knew right away, though, that he wanted to walk. He wanted to try and see if we could do it. And so it was actually this student on the end here. That's kind of why I have that photo up there, so you can kind of see the class I was working with. And I pulled him to a shallower end of the pool, so if he stood up, his torso would be above the water. And I kind of talked to him. And unfortunately, he couldn't respond, but I talked to him, and I told him what we were going to do, and he was just ecstatic. I could see the expressions on his face, and I pulled him up above the water, and I had his feet on top of mine so I could show him the motions of being able to walk. And I took one, he followed. I took a second, he followed, and then I slid my feet away. And I let him take the steps themselves. And he ended up taking 5 steps that day while we were in a pool. And after that moment, I realized that education is extremely powerful. He came to us actually as a refugee from Afghanistan, and a lot of other issues in his life were going on. And with the same as a lot of these prisoners, with a little bit of minor rehabilitation, a huge change can come. And that's been the way that I think about this group that I'm working with now, even though they're very different. So moving on, Jordan Valley in Canyon School District contracted me that following year to work with a student with autism, and I was his individual teacher for a semester, and that gave me the chance to write a curriculum and really understand what it's like being in the classroom and being in that setting every day. And that's been very important to me, just being able to understand these people and understand what you're doing while you're talking to them. And now, Roots is just moving forward with kind of backed by the idea that a small difference can make a big change. And now I'm going to move on to the school to prison pipeline and really what that looks like for students around the U.S. The school to prison pipeline is pretty much a gateway to correctional facilities and prisons from students. A lot of schools have zero tolerance behavior policies and the No Child Left Behind, which all of those are very great, but it singles out the students that are problematic, which most of those students don't necessarily have a great life at home to begin with. And then once they're targeted at school, school isn't a safe place for them to learn and really succeed. And the big thing with this here also is that this is targeting a lot of kids with disabilities and a lot of kids from different demographic backgrounds than people that are white. The big thing to highlight here, kind of data-wise, is that 18% of the school population, and this is nationwide, is African American, and about 46% of those students have been suspended at least once or twice. And the difference compared to someone who is white and in the same situation, the numbers are very appalling. And I just think it's important to notice what's going on so we can change it and not send these kids out of the classroom for a little mistake. And the issue with sending them out of the classroom for a disciplinary action is that they're seeing an administrator and they're seeing an officer of the law that's at the school, And that neither of those people know the student. They don't know what the student is like 90% of the year. They might know him for that one bad day. And what I've found through special education and working with all these different people is that sometimes we just have bad days. And sometimes we're a little off and there isn't really any structure. And sometimes people lose it. They don't have kind of what it takes to keep moving forward in the class. And so also to point out kind of the stats with the kids with disabilities, about 8.6% of students have disabilities in the national schools, and about 32% of them can be found in juvenile detention centers under the age of 18. And it's really affecting all these kids' lives, and it's making it so they can't spend their time that they have to with schoolwork. Because schoolwork, I think, should be a more leisure activity. It's something that isn't hard, it's not backbreaking, it's thought-provoking, and it's something that we can do every day without really hurting ourselves. And I think that's important to point out. And really the solution for the school to prison pipeline is getting teachers to really sit down with their students and talk to that student about any issues that they're having, and being very forward about the issues that they're having with that student and what that student needs to do moving forward to really make some change. And it's totally on the teacher and on the student, and they both have to work together, but it is 100% better to sit down and work hard and work it out together than having that student go to a juvenile detention center where once they're being released, they're probably just going to go to the adult penitentiary after. Also, one thing, with all of the issues going on in schools today, I want to make sure that everybody knows that having officers in schools is still very important, I believe. There's just been so much danger towards schools. I know that we've seen it here at the University of Utah, and schools have seen it around the nation. And I think it's very important that there's officers in there. They just need to be there for the safety of the students instead of the disciplinary action of the students. So moving forward, I'm going to talk to you about recidivism rates and about some of the work that I've been doing in the prison and what it looks like in there. To start, prison is very far from the movies. The best way that I can explain it is a really big high school where the people sleep there. It's kind of what it seems like. They have a lot of programs in the prison, and inmates are constantly moving from one side to the other, and they're constantly being engaged with information such as religious services is probably the biggest here in Utah, music, GEDs, high school educations. They have a lot in there. And really what I found is a lot of them don't have the skills to work at the level that people are putting their classes in there. A lot of the prisoners don't have the capability of reading and math and basic educational skills, so they feel comfortable doing higher level tasks. And that's where we have come in and really thought about how we're going to be able to change that and making it so the entire prison can go and get a GED. That would be my dream. And not having them necessarily need to go through me to do that, but just having the opportunity to do it. And so talking about really the recidivism rates behind that is the recidivism rate is the rate in which people go back to prison within 3 years of being released. And the number is not very concrete. And it's because the only time that someone will add to the recidivism rate is if they're caught doing the same thing for the same offense, and it's tried the same in a court of law. And it's still 75% go back within that 3 years. And we have the highest incarceration rate in the world, and to not have a place where we're rehabilitating these people and making it so they don't come back just adds to a never-ending cycle. And this becomes an issue for all of us here when we're putting tax dollars to what they're doing in there, and we're just going to keep giving the money back. And it's making it just a cycle of more and more pulling and grabbing and pulling and grabbing. And so while I was in there, I worked in transitioning courses. And the big thing that I found is that no prisoner wants to be there, except for the select few, and that select few will probably stay there for a long time. And aside from a handful of them, no one wants to be there, and everybody wants to rehabilitate themselves so they can go enter the real world and go back to their families and go back to a normal life. Because all of them lived fairly normal lives before being tried. And it took me a while to understand this. And I think the big thing that I found was that I was able to sit down with a few prisoners and talk about why they really want to rehabilitate and why they want to become better. And the thing that it came down to was just their family and knowing that there's people that they have to support. And it's just really important to understand that a lot of these prisoners are not wanting to add to this cycle, but they're being forced into it and they're being pulled into it. And the work with religious services inside the prison is amazing. We actually have the most volunteers at any prison in the United States here in Utah. And it's amazing that people are putting the time in to do a lot of work there. However, a lot of people are missed. And a lot of people in the prison aren't able to get out of their cell and go to these classes. So one of the things is if they are punished for something. So one very common thing is tattooing in prison. And so if someone goes and does a homemade tattoo in their cell, an officer will come and confiscate the tattoo gun and everything. And then they have to sit down in what's called an OMR, and that's the Offender Management Review. The closest way to relate it is sitting down with a principal, but instead of a principal, it's a police captain. And anything that they say, instead of just being a rule, is now a law. Is a law inside the prison. And so they knew it before they made their choice, that thing was bad. But once it's made, then that captain has the ability to decrease their star rank, is how they refer to it. But really what it says is, what is the time you can leave your cell? What is the time you have to be back in your cell? And where are your privileges that you can go? And for many of them, they're very restricted. And they'll be restricted for sometimes things that they didn't do. And they'll be restricted for other things that they definitely did do, and they are being very dangerous to others around them. And so I think where some change can come is just getting these people occupied and getting them doing things that they want to be doing instead of just having craft time every once in a while and getting out of their cell to go outside, and just getting them more engaged in the world. Will show that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that making good choices in there just speeds up that time. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, it's just, our prison here is, honestly, we're doing great, and we're looking to have a great move forward towards the new prison out in Provo. And the plans for that are amazing. I don't know if any of you have seen them before, but it's focused all around programming. It's all about getting the rehabilitation for the prisoner so they don't come back. We always tell that to people whenever I'm teaching my transitioning course in there, is I'll go and shake everyone's hand, and I'm just like, I don't want to see you again. Because I know if I see them again, it'll be in there, and they would have done something very similar or the same thing. That's the last thing we want anyone doing. And so now, just moving forward, Roots has been a passion project of mine, and it started about 2 years ago. We ended up winning a boot camp at the University of Utah, which Steve mentioned. I was given an office in LaSonde and a bunch of other stuff, and it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I like helping these people. I'm a teacher. I like talking to other people. And then a couple months down the road, it hit me. It was like, wow, there is a lot more to this than what I initially understood. And I think that sometimes the wisest know what they don't know and know that they don't know. And where I'm at now with this company is that me and my team, we're trying to move it forward. And I've been trying to move it forward fairly slow because these are the lives of people that I really want to affect, and I really want to affect beneficially. And I want to make sure that whatever time we're spending with them is very valuable and that they're getting exactly what they need. So at this point, I've been working in the prison. I've been working on curriculums and finding the people that are going to help build this company and bring it to hopefully fruition, where we can be teaching people all around and getting to the people that are kind of the bad ones. A lot of the forgotten people are really my target. I know that there's a lot of people in there that are stockbrokers and they're in prison, and they're going to know how to read. They're going to be very literate, but it's going to be some of the guys that are don't have the clearance to go everywhere and are not necessarily able to go to these classes, but making it so they can, and going to them if we have to, and making sure that they're taken care of just as much as everyone else. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
Yes, we had a young woman speak about a prison library,
Mm-hmm.
and saying that she accepted donations of books. What's happened to her, and where is that library?
So there's a library in every portion of the prison. And so in Draper, there are 5 prisons in there. There's going to be the Oakers, Lone Peak, the Uintas, the big Wasatch prison, and then, I can't remember the other one, but then there's the mental health facility. So there's all these different facilities, and each one has their own library, each one has their own classrooms, and each one has their own cafeteria. They're all separate, even though they're all in one facility. And so she could be working in a single prison and a single penitentiary there, and those books don't actually get to go around to everyone. And actually everything going through into a library there has to be stickered and reviewed by an officer. And once they're stickered and reviewed, it'll say on it, this is for the Oker prison and their library A. And then they have to put it in there, and then it can't leave that space. So it makes it so a lot of people only see one little bit, and if they're spending 15 years in there, they kind of get through it.
Sorry, what?
Like just with people spending a lot of time in the prison.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I should be closer to this. But just with people spending a lot of time in there, they get through a lot of the information that are in their libraries, and the books that do really speak to them, they'll usually get through them within the first little while. And book donations are important though, and it has been very helpful to get more stuff in there for them. Yes?
So if you had books to donate, like, how would you go about doing it, and who decides what part of the prison gets?
So that's going to be through religious services. His name is Lieutenant Pay. He is an amazing guy. He's the person that fights most. Between him, there's Lieutenant Pay and Lieutenant Barrett, and those two are the ones that fight the most for the education and the programming in there. And they oversee all the books and videos and everything coming in. And it would be just through him, and his email is online. It'll be just on the prison's website. He will be the head of religious services, and they accept donations. Yes?
So I'm very curious about your process. You say you want volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not sure what they do,
Yeah, so volunteers for Roots or volunteers. So the volunteers that I saw mostly in the prison were for religious services. So many people go into the prison and they share sermons and they speak to a lot of the prisoners and help hopefully enlighten them and make them feel a little bit better. And then there's other people that they will help prisoners make bedtime stories for their kids. There's one great program in there that's all volunteer run that these people will record their parent reading a story to their kid, and then they will give that recording and the book to their kid so they can have a bedtime story from their parent who's in prison. Another one is they're making a lot of toys to send over to Africa and make sure that other kids have toys, and they build them all by hand in the prison.
I think to be more specific, what is Roots specifically doing? You said you're growing it slowly.
Mm-hmm.
How are you growing it?
Yeah.
Financially, with people,
So
volunteers?
how it's been now is I'm growing it through just understanding what it takes to put a class together in the prison. I am currently teaching a course right now, and that has been just the big thing for me to understand what these people want to see and really working with that target group. I had no idea what the target audience of Roots was going to look like before getting in there, and unfortunately there's no cameras or videos or anything you can find in a prison just because it's so restricted, and it's very challenging to go find people that are ex-convicts and talk to them and ask them questions about it because most of them don't want to answer. But being in there and really seeing how it all works and what has to happen to really get a course in there is been really where I'm working at now. And there's also a lot of certifications that we've been looking into, and just wanted to make sure that our program could be something that a court of law could say, you have to go and do this for your rehabilitation so then you can get out early. And we've been looking into how to make that possible.
So what kind of course are you teaching?
Just basic literacy. We're gonna start there, and I think after that we'll probably move to elementary math at some point and then basic science at another. And what I've found in my research, just researching other people and what they've found successful, is that recidivism rate, they did this with 100 people in prison, and they found that recidivism rate drops to about 16% after having a full literacy course, to where this person is reading above a 4th grade reading level. And that's all it is, above a 4th grade reading level, being able to read a job application correctly, being able to fill out taxes the right way, and making it so they can be viable in the professional world.
And what's the rate if they don't take the class?
The recidivism rate is about 75% right now. So I've found that it is huge, and it is such an important skill for anyone to have in the modern world. Yes?
Do you have any idea what percentage of prisoners read below the 4th grade level?
So there's about 60% of prisoners are functionally illiterate, is really the term. So that is below the 4th grade reading level, and they've found about 60. I would say it's a little bit higher than that. Knowing what it's like, not being able to read, people are really good at hiding it. They're really good at memorizing and not actually having to read things. And so we found kind of our target group, but most of those guys that are illiterate are usually the dangerous ones, and they're usually the hard ones to get to. But being in there has really allowed me to focus on how do you get there? Because I've been able to go and talk to some of these inmates before, and it's absolutely terrifying, but it's great because they get public contact maybe once every couple years. And yes.
I was going to ask you, do you work with the prison librarian?
I do not work with the prison librarian. I work with programming and YPrep and Voc Rehab is what it's called. And all of those are different rehabilitation services for these prisoners. Some of them see success, but it's kind of sad sometimes because they'll have these really great programs, and they're like Voc Rehab, for instance, gives prisoners pretty much the step out the door on the right foot. They'll make sure that they're paid for their medication if they need any. They'll help them find housing, and their main goal is to help them find a job that they can sustainably keep with any disability. They have that in there right now. They see great success for the first 2 years, 3 years with a prisoner, and then that person falls off again, and then they end up back in prison. And that's where that recidivism rate's really playing a massive role. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the school to prison pipeline, and you've jumped into the prison end. Is there anybody dealing with the school end of that pipeline? Maybe that would be more effective.
Absolutely, and that's been really a big thing that I've found, that it's very important to just figure it out on the education side before it even gets close. And I haven't heard of too many people actually working to solve the school to prison pipeline. I think that a big issue of it is that administrators don't think it's happening, and they don't want to admit that these wrongs are happening in their schools. And there won't really ever be a solution until you admit something's wrong.
I think the wrong may be that the teacher doesn't have the time to sit down one-on-one as you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the administrators recognize that too.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing
Yeah.
it doesn't solve it.
No. And really it's challenging because it's getting the teacher to be more engaged with the student. And can it happen through just more teachers or in smaller class sizes? But then that school costing more money, and it's a really hard kind of world of just red tape to really get through.
How much more money compared to how much it costs to house a prison?
I'm sorry?
How much more money would that cost than what it costs to house a prisoner?
I'm assuming less because it's about anywhere, so for the cheaper states, you're looking $30,000 per year for one inmate. And for a more expensive state, such as like California, you're looking $60,000 per year for one inmate. And teachers generally make about that. A little bit more, a little bit less, but somewhere in the middle. So I think for the tax dollars wise, it would be important to go that route. Yes.
So I was connected with the College of Education, so
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
I saw that the application rate for teachers has dropped 15% at the University of Utah. So to me, that signals one of the issues with the large classrooms. If you have 40 kids,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit of an issue to work with one child, one kid. I'm just outlining a little bit of the challenges. with
Yeah.
being in the classroom and not having enough teachers. And they're recruiting from out of state because
Mhm.
we've got 2 recruiters right now in Iowa trying to recruit teachers
Really?
because there's not enough teachers in Utah. So that's
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely huge. And unfortunately, like, there aren't that many kids that are being excited about being a teacher and giving back. I think that's a problem. Yes.
2 questions. One is, what prison of the 5 are you in?
Okay.
And do you work with are you not allowed to work with certain people, like murder or sex offender, or what is
Um, So I am able to go to all the prisons, which has been amazing. And I think the only one I haven't been to is the maximum security. And they only have 8 men in the maximum security prison at Utah. And that's what you'd think in the movies, Hannibal Lecter, all locked up, that kind of stuff. That's the only place I haven't been in there. And primarily right now, I've been working in the Lone Peak prison, which is the gang sector and geriatrics. They combine the two because they figure that the gang members don't care to hurt any of the older generations in the prison. So that's kind of how they found the issue there, to resolve that. But one thing that is challenging working where I do is that they have A and B days because of the gangs. So there's the big gang rivalries in Utah is the Sureños and the Nortos. And pretty much if they come across each other in prison, they'll try and kill each other. They probably will kill each other. And there's nothing really that an officer or anyone can do about it. And they have to have these A and B days. So you have to have a day once a week that'll say be on a Tuesday, and then you have to have the same class on Wednesday, so then you can get both populations. And it's just really challenging because there's half the group in that prison that has to be in their cell all day long because they can't keep them separated. Also, they're trying to harm each other, which is neither here nor there. That's kind of, I think, another topic of just the gang violence and the gang presence. Yes?
Have you noticed a difference between the literacy rate between men and women prisoners?
I've found that they're pretty similar, at least just from my small interactions with them. I have just about the same people in my classes ask to help filling out forms, as much in both the men and the women. But I'm assuming that the women are a little bit better off than the men in that, just because I feel like boys care a little bit less about school than the ladies sometimes. And I know that I've found that kind of as I'm teaching these people and all that stuff. Yes?
Do you find any centers or models of excellence in other any state initiatives in other states, or a national level, or collaboration on this with some of the educational foundations like Casey Foundation?
So I haven't found any that are strictly literacy in prison. A lot of them will do either basic education as an all-around thing, and they'll do it in a single year class. There's also a group called Hudson Link that I have gone back and forth with to communicate with. And they're backed by Columbia University. And I talked to a lot of the teachers that worked for them over in New York City, and they've kind of helped me, I guess, find my way a little bit and what we were doing. But Hudson Link is also college in prison. So those people leaving the New York State Penitentiary, they're able to leave with a degree from Columbia, which is an Ivy League degree for someone that went to prison for 10, 15 years is pretty amazing.
So how is Roots funded?
So currently right now, Roots is not funded. And it's just, we haven't gotten to a point yet where I think that we can start going in and teaching courses. And so I'm trying to get everything of that figured out before we really gain nonprofit status. Because once you gain nonprofit status, there's just a lot more work, and I still have kind of other things going on while I'm slowly pushing towards Roots as a goal.
Are you trying to become federally tax exempt 501c3?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Done any work with Dr. Aaron Castro here at the University of Utah?
So I actually tried to talk to Erin Castro. She actually never got back to me, unfortunately. But she's very busy, and her work is amazing. And that was the first person that we found that I wanted to make the curriculum and really structure it and make sure we were doing everything correctly, because she's done such extensive research on the subject. And I haven't gone that far in my education to where I feel comfortable really making the whole entire thing. So for me, it's a lot of finding people that have the skills and have the expertise to do some of this stuff. So it's been challenging. Yes?
In building your company, have you thought about replacing yourself? In other words, expanding your talents to others to make your corporation more successful?
Yeah. I think that's more of the goal than me staying with Roots. Is I feel like I understand a lot about what's going on in there, and finding someone who is very passionate about it and finding someone who understands, I think, more of the business side of it. I think I'm better at making ideas and designing the company and making it an experience than being an actual businessman. I've always been more of an artist and a teacher than business and numbers, just because I actually can't really do math anymore. So, yeah. Are there any more questions? Yes.
Is your degree in education then?
No. So I initially started college as a PT or OT in special education. I left that after a semester. I began working on my design degree. I got a design minor. That's the multidisciplinary design. So really it's the combination of graphics, industrial, and product design. And it's making an experience for a person and designing every aspect of that experience and putting it all together. And I initially did that, and then now I'm doing sociology and criminology. And the way I'm doing all the work in the prison now is through an internship through the criminology department. And I was actually the first person from the U to be an intern at the prison. But now there are 3. So we're getting in there and doing some good work.
Have you thought about hooking up with those other 2 people?
I haven't yet. I don't know who they are. So there's not a list, unfortunately, of all the kids who have done it, which I wish there was. So we could all work. Yeah.
If you had to name 2 things to help your company at this stage in your activity, what would they be?
I think it would be the taxes side of a nonprofit. It just doesn't make very much sense to me. And then finding someone who is a more comfortable teacher than I am, I think would be very important. Anything else? All right, awesome. Thank you so much.